For the New York film producers, New Jersey still provided rural locations. It was there that Griffith made his first Western, like this 1911 story of Indian life, A Squaw's Love. Vitagraph was formed in 1897 and soon became known for its productions of Shakespearean tragedies. But even they could not ignore the enormous popularity of the Western since the Great Train Robbery. This film, The Easterner, was made by Vitagraph in 1907. Edison was still determined to profit from his inventions and patents. Some companies, like Vitagraph and Kalem, meekly paid up license fees on every film for the use of Edison patents. So did the American offices of the French companies, Méliès and Pathé. In Philadelphia, Edison collected license fees from the Lubin Company, formed in 1896 by Sigmund Lubin, who started out by pirating the films of Méliès. In Chicago was the S&A Company. S&A was a play on the initials of the firm's founders, George K. Spoor, a Nickelodeon proprietor, and Max Aronson, a former vaudeville player, better known by 1910 as Bronco Billy, the popular star of a weekly series of one-reel cowboy adventures. Another Chicago company was Selig Poliscope, established in 1897 by a traveling magician who called himself Colonel William Selig, the most prolific producer of Western subjects. The Selig Company filmed its Westerns, such as Seminole's Sacrifice, made in 1911, in the woodlands outside Chicago. At first, Selig resisted Edison's attempt to monopolize the industry. But as the industry grew, all the big companies saw the advantages of some sort of combination to keep out the new independent producers who were beginning to challenge them. The Edison Company fought fiercely against the independent companies who refused to pay for the rights to use Edison patents. At a meeting in New York in January 1909, Edison and the heads of the major companies agreed to combine into a trust, using their monopoly to force exhibitors to show only films made by members of their new motion picture patents company. It was war. Week by week, Carl Laemmle, as a leader and spokesman for the independents, pilloried the trust in advertisements and the trade press. At the same time, the trust was harassing independent producers and exhibitors with its detectives and strong-arm men, confiscating or wrecking unauthorized equipment. Life in the cities of the East Coast became intolerable. Producers first tried their luck in Cuba and in Florida. And then, one by one, the independent companies took the train westwards, more than 3,000 miles to California. They headed south to Los Angeles, the boom town of the gold rush 60 years before. It was close to the Mexican border in case sudden flight from the patents company became necessary, and the sunlight was good for filming. In 1911, the Nestor Company converted an old tavern into the first studio to be built in a quiet, rural area called Hollywood. Alan Dwan was typical of the pioneer directors of the early days in California. He had been lured away from S&A in Chicago by the independent Flying A Company to direct their westerns. Flying A made a lot of virtue out of necessity. There is no scenic artist who has ever been born who could originate and paint scenery that will anywhere equal the stupendous scenic beauties of the Western country. That's what they boasted. We propose to instill into Flying A cowboy films the spirit of the West as it really is. the atmosphere of the West as it really was, and the romance of Western life as everybody, even the Westerners themselves, fondly imagine it ought to be. And to do them justice, they did just that. The Poisoned Flume was one of Alan Dewan's first films, shot in the El Cajon Valley near the Mexican border in 1911. The story tells how the ranchers discover that somebody is poisoning the flume and killing their cattle. The first companies to trek west were the independents, fleeing from the harassments of the trust companies. But the trust companies could not themselves ignore the advantages of California, the sun and the spectacular locations. In 1912, D.W. Griffith and his company left a frozen New York to spend the winter filming in California. There they made one of the finest films Griffith was to direct for Biograph. The Massacre uses the saga of General Custer's last stand as the historical basis for a story of Indians attacking a wagon train in revenge for the destruction of their village.